We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
Welcome back to the Mankind podcast, where we dive deep into the issues affecting men's mental health and explore pathways to strength, healing, and resilience. This is me, Boysen Hodgson. Hey, did you know that depression affects over 6 million men in the United States each year? And even though more than twice that many women are diagnosed with depression every year, men are significantly less likely than women to seek help for any mental health challenges, and over 4 times as likely to die by suicide. Societal expectations that tell men to man up and shove down their emotions lead to a dangerous cycle where we suffer in silence, unwilling to admit we're struggling or ask for support. From a study on depression from the National Institutes of Health, depression can look very different in men, with symptoms manifesting as anger attacks, aggression, risk-taking, and substance abuse, rather than some of the more typical symptoms like low affect, lack of energy, loss of motivation, loss of sleep, and emotional pain. According to the Centers for Disease Control, suicide remains a leading cause of death for men worldwide. It's in the top 3 causes of death for boys and men aged 10 to 44, and top 9 for men of all ages. This is a stark reminder of the urgent need to break down the stigma surrounding men's mental health and encourage open dialogue and support. Here it is. We all carry hidden burdens. The men's work we're doing in the Mankind Project, through our programs and men's groups, gives men a place where to face these burdens and deal with them, to get more honest with ourselves and others, to share our vulnerability, and to act with more integrity. Through men's work, we learn to live on purpose, recognize our real connections to ourselves and others, in our pain, our joy, our longings, and our triumphs. Mankind Podcast is setting out to prove that there's more than one way to be a man. For Mental Health Month 2024, we'll be focusing on exploring some of this hidden territory. So let's spark conversations, challenge stereotypes, and pave the way for a future where every man and every person feels seen, heard, and supported. This is the Mankind Podcast. Let's dive in. Hey everybody, it's Boysen Hodgson. Welcome back to the Mankind Podcast, the podcast where we are setting out to prove episode on episode that there is indeed more than one way to be a man. Today, I am super excited to bring something. I think this is the first conversation about this that we have had on the Mankind Podcast. It's going to be reflective. It's going to be hopeful. It's going to be probably maybe even challenging for some of our listeners out there. I'm with Mike Welch today. Mike, say hello.
Hey, everybody.
So Mike Welch is with an organization in Oregon called Satya Therapeutics. We're going to get into the depth of what Satya Therapeutics does. And I'm going to tell you that Michael Welch is a seasoned and compassionate guide with decades of experience in the realm of psychedelics, men's therapy, and martial arts. Through a unique fusion of these disciplines, he empowers people to become the best version of themselves, guiding them on extraordinary voyages towards self-fulfillment and self-realization. He has decades of experience working with entheogenic compounds, and he's now part of the movement to expand access and education about therapeutic use of psychedelics. After wrestling with demons around anger management, anxiety, and substance abuse that plague so many of us men, Mike now finds himself on the cutting edge of helping others at a licensed psilocybin practice in Oregon. Mike is also a new warrior. He went through the NWTA, the New Warrior Training Adventure in Oregon in 2008. And I'm guessing that we'll touch on some of what that has meant to him in his life also. So, Mike, you reached out to me not too long ago. I don't know, what inspired you to reach out to have this conversation? Let's start there.
I'm still active in an I group that I've been for the last 13 years, same men, and realizing from just bringing this to group and talking to them, even in our check-ins about what's going on and what's working for us, what's not, there was a lot of confusion and misunderstanding about what was actually going on, what I was doing. And so obviously the men in my group were interested to see what was going on in my life, but they really didn't understand what was going on. A lot of them had experiences prior with psilocybin or with any kind of psychedelic. And it ran the range from, it was one of the best times of my life, and all I did was giggle, to it was one of the worst experiences I've ever had. I couldn't possibly ever do that. I can't see how there's any value in that. And everything in between. And I thought it would be more understood than it was, but I've come to realize that isn't the case. And so I see the value in it. It's something that's not going to work for everybody, but it's something that I think a lot of people, if they can understand it a little bit more, they can see the value in it and possibly use it to improve their lives.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. That's a great place to start out. So let's rewind way back. And when we were just having our intro conversation, I kind of said, so would you describe yourself as a chemist? And pick that up from there. How would you describe yourself?
I would describe myself as a high level amateur. The same way I describe the way that I enjoy working on cars. Chemistry is the base level at which we humans like interact with the world. I mean, we have a conscious existence where we're looking outside and we're taking that data in, but the reality is, the majority of the processes that are going on that make me, I am totally unaware of, and they're actually physical transactions that are going on. I'm creating electricity in my body to make my heart run through a chemical process. I'm like digestion going on. I don't think about it, but it's there. White blood cells, moving around, attacking and incoming. The list just goes on and on. It's not infinite, but it's so large as to be, it's just mind boggling. So very early on, when, the earliest time I remember enjoying chemistry, the idea was Christmas, getting one of the old kind of little science kits used to be able to get,
right.
And just the idea that you could put two things together that started as one thing and then became something else, totally different. Two liquids together that created a solid, it seemed almost like magic, but it was repeatable. You could do it again and again and again, that really clicked for me, the way my brain works, I'm very logical. I'm very, step by step, and it's just a way of explaining the world for me.
Yeah.
And that was what it came down to. I understood it, and it made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And I like the math part of it too.
I like the math part of it. So for those the listeners out there who are tuning into this conversation, there are going to be some of the guys, some of the folks, some of the men and women who listen to the podcast are going to be like, sure, I read Michael Pollan's more recent book about psychedelics. Sure, I have some understanding. I had no idea what was going on in the state of Oregon. Bring us up to speed on how things are changing in regards to psychedelics, especially around psilocybin for you?
So pretty close to a year ago was when it became available to apply and become a uh, either a service provider, which is a service center where you have to do the facilitation, or a facilitator, which is the person who helps somebody through the process, or a producer, which is someone who grows, the actual mushrooms that you use. So these things opened up, and they're all being managed by the OHA, the Oregon Health Authority, and the Oregon Health Authority is not a regulatory body the way like we have the OLCC, or you might be familiar with whatever version of like alcohol stuff that you guys have. They generally get lumped together with alcohol, drugs, or cannabis and things like that. But they don't. The OHA doesn't have any sort of ability to like punish or work on that sort of like on the punishment side of things.
Yeah.
Their focus is on actual health and the people involved within that.
Mm-hmm.
So from day one, the focus of the Oregon Health Authority with the psilocybin was, how does this program look to provide the most amount of benefit for the people involved? Okay. And they went one step further with that and added a social equity component to it, where not only are we, testing the mushrooms that are being grown. There's a specific layout of, how much we do, what we do, where we do it at. There's also a component where, to be a facilitator or to have that service center, we're required to do a certain amount of social equity work, where we help disadvantaged people, whatever qualifies, and as that is what we do. It doesn't matter if you're black or white or trans or bi or poor or, it doesn't matter. You can fall under that social equity component.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is we didn't want like this to just be for rich people, I guess is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Because since we're the only place in the United States doing it, the process, the facility and doing it is not terribly expensive. Anywhere from, $1,200 to $2,000 in our own facility. Mm-hmm. But when you're coming from Oklahoma and you're having to take the time off work, you have to fly over here, get a hotel for 2 to 3 days, because this is not something that you're just going to fly in, do it and go. All of a sudden, now this is a $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 process. Yeah. And so it's a lot to ask of people, especially when, what we're working with, myself. There's many, many treatment things, but for myself personally, I deal pretty consistently with like long-term treatment resistant depression and complex PTSD.
Yeah.
And oftentimes these things are not conducive to people being able to have the ability to have the means to come look for treatment. And we've seen that in our own state. So, to get the license, to go through everything, we do a certain amount of social equity work so that we can share this with as many people as we can.
Yeah. So now let's zoom out to the why. So you just started touching on the why. Why would I consider traveling? Who am I if I'm considering traveling across the country to go and do a assisted psilocybin journey with you? So talk about what psilocybin does.
So and I want to be real clear that what we're doing is at the very, very tip of this spear. Okay. Yeah. In the last 6 months, we've seen over 300 clients. Okay. That's more than they did at the Johns Hopkins studies to get this approved, to even get to this point. Okay. So if we're looking at full, legitimized, legal treatments, maybe 2,000, 3,000 people out of a country of 326 million. Okay. So what we're working with now are things that we know for sure that you can get improvement on. But there may be things farther down the road that get studied that we don't know about. Right now, the majority of our people that come through Satya are coming from out of state. They are between the ages of around 40 to 65, 70. Okay. They've been dealing with a lifetime of depression or anxiety, or like I said, long-term PTSD stemming from mostly military service at this point, but also trauma from early age, abuse of all kinds. It's yeah, and I think the reason that these are the main groups that we're dealing with is because they're the ones are most studied and most dealt with already, like in society at large. Mental health has become a major concern for people in the United States, and there's no doubt about that whatsoever. You can look at the statistics, you can do all, but it's not in question.
Yeah.
Right? So by the time somebody is investing the time and energy to come to us, they've tried everything else. They've tried, talk therapy. They've tried ECR. They've tried, you name it. I mean, they're wanting to change how they see themselves in the world, and they haven't been able to do it themselves. This treatment is not a magic bullet. It's not a cure-all. A buddy of mine, always like to talk about, better living through chemistry, right? Well, once you get the chemistry right, that doesn't change the fact that you still need the better living.
Yeah, nice. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So how people, I mean, when you're dealing with anxiety or depression, it's not ever just one thing. But you have to start somewhere. So if you can somehow hit, as I like to, I mean, we all like computers and we're used to using it. The idea of hitting almost like a factory reset button for the brain. Okay. Well, that can take care of the chemistry part.
Yeah.
Now, if you're working through that better living part and you begin to change the behaviors, the environment that is helping to reinforce those negative thought patterns or any of the anxiety producing items that are in their lives, you can start moving forward.
So what does it do? Yes. And thank you for saying that it's not a magic bullet, in that it depends on, so this is a, when we have done this, and this, and we're still not able to get that reset, this is something that we can add on to it to give us a boost. What does it actually do? What does a psychedelic do?
So I guess I'll start. Analogies seem to work when explaining this to people. So I'll start with that, and then we can move into some of the chemistry pieces if we need to. But a lot of times that just is a way to describe what's going on, and it doesn't actually tell us what's going on. So the easiest way that I found to describe is imagine that your brain and your thought processes are like it's your ski run. Okay. And every day you've gone up and you take the chairlift up and you get to the top of the ski run and you start zipping down, and you do this day after day. Okay. Pretty soon, right, you've created moguls, you've created trails, you know where the trees are, you know where the rocks are, right? And so you're just, and you keep going down that because those are the patterns that you laid down. Okay. Psilocybin and other, other chemicals in that same vein, MDMA, LSD, can have similar things. But for psilocybin, precisely as we're dealing with here, doing the treatment is like putting a fresh coat of snow over the top of that ski run. So now you go take the chairlift back up to the top and you look down, and instead of seeing those moguls, instead of seeing the trails that you've been using, now you can choose a different direction. You can look over and there's some trees over there. Let's go look over there. Oh, I always go left. Let's go right. You're still going to be you. It's still you, your brain. It's still your ski run. But now you have an opportunity to create different paths and different ways to look at yourself and to look at your life.
That's very well said. That's a great analogy. And I'm going to take us even further because I'm a nerd and I like nerding out on this stuff. When we had our initial conversation, one of the things that you talked about um, was around neuroplasticity and some of the chemistry that goes into that. Let's talk about neuroplasticity a little bit. So, okay, nerd alert, here we go.
So, the easy way for most people to understand neuroplasticity is your brain has neural pathways, and they're like almost everything in the human body is based on sort of an economy of energy.
Yes.
Everything we do takes some amount of energy in whatever form you want to talk about, whether it's, ATP at the beginning, you're bringing in, you're bringing in food sources that turn things into glucose. And then that gets turned into all these different things that are going around. Okay. So neuroplasticity, if you're not, your brain is like any other muscle. If you're not using it, okay, your brain just kind of goes, oh, we're no longer going that direction. Great. We're going to stop and just hold things there, and we're going to use that energy somewhere else because there's a finite amount. Okay. So brain chemistry is something that we talk about a lot, but it's not, we can see things that are going on, but different drugs have the same effect using different ways of going about things. Some things, are increasing serotonin or reducing dopamine, and then you're still having, effect of improvement, or the ability to reduce, the thoughts and the ideas of anxiety, depression, these things. But you take another drug, and instead of reducing the serotonin, it increases it, right? It becomes, and the dopamine level goes up as well. And then you see the same result in somebody who's got a different brain chemistry. So we understand that these things are working, the process going on, but it's that's why we have there's literally hundreds of different kinds of antidepressant medicines, right? And each one, if you get the right combination for the right person, they'll tell you, man, this was great. It worked awesome. And then the next person you give it to, right? They go, well, it worked okay. I wasn't feeling really, great, but I felt a little bit better. And then somebody else takes it and goes, man, I can't do this. I feel like killing myself when I do it. The same chemistry, the same chemicals. We're dealing. The majority of our focus right now is in the serotonin, the dopamine, the norepinephrine. I always mispronounce that one. So for anyone who's don't yell at me. It's the and you start getting into these SSRIs, the selective serotonin retake inhibitors, but then we have like Wellbutrin's not an SSRI. It's I think it's an SSNI. So it doesn't stop the uptake. It actually increases it, but it has the same effect for some people, not for everybody. And we get real deep into like whether SSRIs, because these things, when you're using the psilocybin treatment, if you're using an SSRI, it takes up the space that psilocybin wants to be in. It wants to come and click into that space, but that SSRI holds it. Okay. So the first sort of conflict that we come into before we even start talking to people, whatnot, is a chemistry piece right away, where we've got this wall of this SSRI. We need to get over it. And once we've dealt with that, now we have to find, the proper dosage to create the effect that we want. Okay. And, even though in theory, Wellbutrin is not an SSRI, it still has that same blocking effect. And there's quite a few things that do that. Gabapentin does it. Things like ghost pipe, which is a real common additive in like a lot of supplements and sort of nutraceutical things that you'll get at like a health food store. So as we move into working with people, the first thing we're doing is figuring out like what are you
What's
on,
the baseline?
right? What and yeah, and how's it going to affect what we're doing? And the our 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 uh, our group, right? Our original group of people that we're trying to work with, that number is so small, right? That we can't. We encounter things all the time that we didn't know were going to have an adverse effect. So, the nice benefit, though, of psilocybin is that short of a really bad interaction with lithium, okay, which is one of the before, yeah, I'll step into that for a second. Aside from lithium, okay, psilocybin is one of the safest chemicals that we know for any sort of treatment in this regard. Okay, it's and I think it's not hard for people to understand that, right? Like, you could smoke so much marijuana, but you can't overdose, right? You can take so much psilocybin that you feel like you've died. And sometimes that is the point that we're taking people to. Okay. And you might feel like you've died, and you may feel like you're gonna die, but you don't, and you won't. Okay. I don't think it's hard for people to understand that some of these naturally occurring compounds, our bodies have come to terms with these things over the hundreds and thousands of years that we've been, right? Just because we're doing psilocybin therapy now doesn't mean that we're doing really anything different than what we've been doing for 10, 15, 20,000 years. Taking somebody into that cave, bringing them to a place, of possible adversity, giving them an experience that can be challenging and out of their realm. It's in that regard, it's very, very similar to the initiations that we go through, over a weekend, and is this more intense? Absolutely. But it's because we're trying to deal with an issue that is much greater than hey, I'm having problems, understanding my own value. My confidence is down. I can't communicate effectively to my spouse or my significant others or my children. Those are all big issues, right? And so during our weekend, we break them down, we bring everybody back up. It's not that different when we're doing the psilocybin. It's just the things that we're trying to address are much, much greater.
Yeah.
When somebody spends 20 years every day thinking honestly that, man, if I just died today, okay, maybe I should just end it. Who would care? What does it matter? What does it change? Right? There are people that we see every day through our centers. Like, this is their norm. It's not, it's not when you go to the ocean and you look over the cliff and it's beautiful and you have that really quick intrusive thought, right? Of, I could just step over the edge. What would it be like? I just step over the edge. I could just jump, and there you go. And then you go, oh no, that's crazy. It's beautiful, and you turn around and walk away. We have a lot of people that they'll sit there at the edge of that cliff and not just have that thought of like, oh, how would it be like, but plan out, how would I make this happen? How would I make this, like the least damaging to the people in my lives or my life? That one for me is tough, okay? Because we have a lot of people who are on that suicidal edge. They're everything from bipolar, they're manic depressive, they're it's just the only thing that we own in our lives is our lives, us. It's the only thing truly that, like, from the inside, I own, that I'm here. And so the decision to each day keep going or end that existence, there can be no more personal decision that can be made at all, right? So I'm when somebody is feeling that way and doesn't think that they might at some point be able to control that urge, right? those are the people right now that we're seeing a lot of
Mm-hmm.
in our treatment center.
Mm-hmm. I'm very struck by just the last few minutes. As soon as we got to there and the real world impact of who you're seeing, your physical body, I'm seeing, Mike, as we're talking, your physical body changed, the emotion in your voice changed, the kind of real world impact of what you're doing is very present now in the room, which I think is meaningful to me. It's very powerful to me. And so what does it mean for someone in that position to come to you? What's possible? What do you see through the work?
What's possible is for someone to completely change the way that they've been for the last 20, 30 years. It's possible. We've seen it. I'm not the only facilitator at our service center. If you look at the bio sheet, there's 8 to 10 of us. But you would get the same story from any of them that you're getting from me. Right? It's to help somebody who's truly in need and to be of service to them. There isn't any more profound thing to be, to at least in my opinion, right? It's something that matters, and that's one of those sort of like the dichotomy of this that I wish we had some way to deal with, because yes, somebody's coming and paying for this service, right? But I'm not sitting there because you're paying me to be there, even though they still have to, you have to pay for the rent of the service center. You have to save, but convincing somebody that you're not there for the paycheck, right? You're there because they're asking for help and they're willing to allow us to say, hey, this might help you. Okay. But it's not about, the money. It's about you being better, whatever that looks like for them when we're done.
Yeah.
And they're old, old song lyric from the Stone Temple Pilots that from when I was in high school and hit me and said, called One Time a Thing Occurred to Me. What's real and what's for sale?
Hmm.
And I've carried that my whole life. We need money. It's a form of energy. It's a form of exchange. It shows us like this has this value, and I get it. I was a double major in criminology and economics. I get all that. But I also know that for a lot of people, especially men, and I was having this discussion with my daughter Dose, her ex-husband, last night, going to therapy and knowing that he's paying for that almost invalidates anything that he's getting out of it. Because he's having to pay for someone to listen to him talk for an hour, right? Or whatever time frame is. Here, we do some of that sort of cognitive therapy. Yeah. Okay. Someone contacts us. We, spend, probably the first 20, 30 minutes just making sure that we can even do this for you. Because like I alluded to before with the lithium, there are 4 things that I have to ask you before you ever, otherwise we can't even move forward with treatment. 1, have you been on or are you currently on lithium? Okay. If you are, we're done, because psilocybin and lithium can interact, slow your heart rate down, and you just go to sleep and don't wake up. Okay. So that one's a big one. And it comes up because lithium has always been that sort of last step of mental health.
Bipolar, especially, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that one. So if somebody has a current and active diagnosis of a psychosis, okay. So if you're currently diagnosed with something like that, bipolar or manic depressive thing, it's like our treatment, even though you might need it, we legally can't offer that. If you had ideations about self-harm or you had ideations of harming others, we can't treat you. Okay. So that's why earlier I talked about that intrusive thought.
Yeah.
There's a difference between the intrusive thought and the ideation, right? Everybody at some point thinks, dude, what would my world be like? How would people get around without me being here? Okay. And that's not the same thing as
Actively
writing a letter,
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So once we're over those 4 things, great. Now we're done. We can move into the step of explaining, okay, what it looks like, what the treatment looks like, and how it works. And this might be a good time to just do the thumbnail sketch, the elevator pitch for what it is.
Excellent.
So step 1 is that intro call of answering the questions, explaining to people and figuring out, can we do the treatment for them, and will it possibly help them? Step 2 is an intake assessment period, which lasts, depending on and I'm going to speak for myself, not anybody else, but for myself, that can be anywhere between 2 and 3 hours. Okay. And in that period of time, I'm building a biopsychosocial profile of the person that's sitting across from me. Okay. Because once we've gone through that, we can talk about things that might come up. Why are they here? What does their life look like? What is their support structure? All of the things that have gotten them to the point of where they are and why they're seeking treatment. Okay. That it is important information, because when we move to step 3, which is the administration, okay, that time is anywhere between about 4 and 8 hours, depending on the dosage that we are using for that particular administration session. The reason we're doing that intake assessment to build that biopsychosocial profile is sometimes during that administration, people can do what's called looping. They can get caught into an idea, something in their past or something that they've fixated on, and they will keep coming back to it. Okay, and that can be incredibly, anxiety, and it doesn't produce a good outcome, because then they're not dealing with something, they're just reliving something. Okay, so we use that the biopsychosocial profile to sort of help get through that if that occurs. Okay, and as the person is going through the administration, this isn't like it's not like being drunk. It's not like you are still lucid the entire time. It's you.
Yeah.
Okay. If you need to go to the bathroom, you raise your hand, you say, I got to go to the bathroom. So we get up, we walk out of the room, and they'll be a little unsteady because there's a lot of information coming in, audio, from oral stuff, visual, all the things that are going on, because it is hallucinogenic. But you're still you. You walk down, go to the bathroom, come back, sit back down. Okay. The things that are going on, in their head, I can't know, because I can't be in their head. It's just impossibility. So for that period of time, they are basically doing their own therapy. Okay. There's no guessing about, a therapist going, well, I think maybe doing this. This is them in their own head dealing with their own issues. So in my mind, the way I look at it is, I am the guardrails of an 8-lane freeway. Okay. So I'm not going to tell you what lane to go in, right? Or how fast to go or how slow to go. Okay. I'm just going to make sure that you stay between these guardrails on this freeway. Okay. And that, to me, is why this whole thing works, because it's an experiential piece where I'm not telling you. I mean, we've all been for those of us in the Mankind Project, we've been in an eye group. We've sat and we listened to one of our brothers talk, and you just go, dude, I know exactly what's going on here. This is just that lack of self-worth again. You're showing it here. But you can't tell the man that. He has to experience it. Okay? That's, from a psilocybin standpoint, what's going on in that administration period of when you're in that mushroom space. Okay, that is what's going on. They are in a very, and this is, this is sort of me now, a bit of an opinion, interpreting what I've seen going on through all the facilitations and parts that are going on. The conscious mind and the unconscious mind are now no longer separated. They are coming together, and the unconscious, that subconscious that's been controlling everything, that takes care of your digestion and your heart rate and all these things, when it knows when things are wrong, and it tries to give you data and information, but it doesn't have words. Okay. So when we break down that wall between the conscious and the subconscious, that's where it can get really challenging for people, especially people who have developed a lot of coping techniques to deal with their, anxiety or their depression or what's going on for them. So when they're getting all this data now, and the subconscious is like, man, I've got this chance to it can be like drinking water from a fire hose. Okay. It's so we take that analogy and we get done with the session. They have their journey, as we like to call it. You get to the other side of it. Okay. We'll do a quick sort of like recap topic. Hey, how are you feeling? What are you doing? Anything? But it's that same thing. The experience is so intense that there's not a lot to be done usefully after that. You just bask in that afterglow and take it with you. Over the next week, and that week to 4 weeks, there's different, like the state requires one integration session, which to me, after all the men's work that I've done, that's just not enough. So I always do 3. And whether they can afford the extra 2, it's $50 per integrated session. If they can't afford it, it doesn't matter. You get it. Okay. It's not a question of that, because the psilocybin, we put that whole new coat of snow. That snow is on there. So there we are, where we've got these new choices, and we come out, we're excited, everything's great. And then the next 2 weeks, our brain has the ability, that neuroplasticity that we were talking about. The neurons now are they have the ability to create new pathways. It's surprisingly similar when you're looking on an MRI machine or thing, as to when a child is learning, like if you don't learn to speak between the ages of 1 and 3, you will generally struggle, because your brain and the chemistry and the instructions that our body has says, okay, from 1 and 3, we're going to learn this skill. Okay, then we got it's good. We got to move on. We got other things going on. We got to grow this body. We got to whatever's going, So this opens those channels back up for anywhere between 2 and 3 to 4 weeks. Okay. Other drugs of this nature do different things. MDMA tends to be longer than that. LSD tends to be longer than that. Okay. But also the time in which you're under is much longer, and the dosage is a lot different. And that, and I keep mentioning those other 2 because from my experience and treatments and studies, there's a lot of interplay between those things, and they, depending on where somebody's at in their life, a combination of those things can really make a difference. If like psilocybin doesn't just work by itself, especially in regards to PTSD. But that integration period afterwards, of 2 to 3 weeks after, now we go back and we take that intake assessment, that biopsychosocial profile, and we start to integrate the things that are going on in their life, the experiences they had during their journey. How does that fit into their life? What's going on for them? What's worried? It's not, once again, it's not that different than going to the New Warrior Training weekend and coming out like, oh my God, everything's, and the first thing they tell you is, hey, don't quit your job, don't go. It's like you need to get a baseline, because you're in a completely different state than you have been. So, and it's so that whole process, right? Watching somebody go from barely functioning, okay, to having, their spouse call and say, I can't thank you enough. And us telling us like, look, it's like, it's not, I didn't do this. Okay. I didn't at all. each person is truly responsible for their own treatment in this regard. And I think also that's why sometimes it works better for some people than it does for others. Right? I some of the people I've seen have the best success are people who have they've been doing therapy, they've been working it, and that's fine. Okay. But the ability, like, for lack of a better term, the people that I see have the least results from are people who what I would say lack imagination. It's hard for them to see themselves outside of themselves. Okay. Because when we get into that deep mushroom space, and when we talk about ego death, we're talking about the idea where somebody at some point, almost every time during these journeys, they will look at me and say, "Who are you? Who am I? Where are we?" Right? And they're still there. They know that it's not, but there's a period of time where they can step outside of themselves, and they're no longer putting those judgments. They're not putting that focus on it. They just have the ability to look at themselves without all of the prior judgments, the angst, all of the, for a short period of time, you that sack of rocks, you can put it down. Yeah. And just look and even open that sack and go, man, I don't. So it is science, because we know how the chemistry works, right? Because that's the part I like. You can measure that. You can go, well, we're going to need this many, milligrams of analyte, and this much psilocybin, this much psilocybin, but it's not even close to the full story. The story becomes complete when you add, that person and their desires and what they have to support their success on the other side.
Yeah, the better living part that we started with, right? That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So sticking with the ski slope analogy, it's like my ability to imagine the fact that when I get to the top of the hill and what I've been looking down at is a double black diamond mogul field for the last 10 years. And that's what it feels. That's what my life feels like. And the imagination is, oh, there's Shady Way right there that I just never fucking noticed it, but it's right there.
Yeah.
And what would it be like to take Shady Way down today? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we're doing this treatment, for people who are kind of at the on the bell curve of mental health, right? They're over here. They're in the like extreme. And then we've got the super healthy, well-adjusted, no issue. They're over on the other side. The majority of us live here in the bell curve. Okay. So at some point, I would like to see this become accepted, because this can, for even the people on that bell curve, the benefits of something like this, it's like a mental tune-up.
Yeah.
It's like a mental tune-up for a time period where you can just, people do it once a year, once every 2 years, a way to settle in and look at themselves, reassess where they're at, and decide, man, what's working, what's not working for me, and it's like I said, it's not a magic pill. I mean, I've got a lot of experience, actually way more experience with MDMA from a therapeutic stance than psilocybin. But that's for it's a different tool, right?
Yes.
That's what all these things are. They're tools. You can pick up that gun and you can go shoot a deer and feed your whole neighborhood and family, for a week, or you can get drunk, have an argument, and shoot your neighbor. Same weapon, same tool, right? But the effects are obviously much different. Hurt people hurt people. The less the less people that we have that are hurting, the less damage and hurt we're going to cause.
Yeah.
And underneath all of this, that's really what this is somebody's coming to us. They don't want to hurt anymore.
Yeah. Themselves or the people in their lives. Right. Yeah. And that's always there.
Yeah.
We're getting toward the end here, and I want to make sure that I give you time to look ahead at, like, in a minute or two, like, what's your vision for where this is headed? You're part of, like, you're on the cutting edge, tip of the iceberg, tip of the spear, as you said at the beginning. What are you hoping to see a year from now, 5 years from now in this opening field?
I look at it like triage. Okay. We have to start with like the things that are the most broken and fix those first. Okay. My business partner, who started Satya, with me, he's been down in Missouri helping them craft a lot of their laws, because they are looking at a similar program and setting it up. Because, to be honest, Missouri is a very poor state, and a huge amount of our soldiers and our military come from that. And when they come back with PTSD, that immediately translates into suicide. It translates into domestic violence. The list goes on and on. Okay. So for me, the VA has the ability to decide where to spend the money on their treatments. Because right now, from an insurance standpoint, you can't do anything. This is a Schedule I substance from the federal government. So it technically has no, high chance of abuse, no medical value whatsoever. Right. But we know that's not true. Okay. So if I'm looking a year, 2 years in advance, that would be an easy way to make big gains. Okay. With a captive audience that's really easy to get a hold of, and they're interested in doing it. Yeah. And it could very easily, the average PTSD treatment for a soldier right now, once they can finally get it, runs between $35,000 and $40,000 per person. Right? Like here, you're looking at something that you could be doing for $1,000 to $2,000 if you took a state, had the state provide, grow the mushrooms thing, because it's not hard. We're the only company that's fully integrated from top to bottom. We grow the mushrooms that we use. Okay, so we're everything that we use, we do. My hands are on it. Yeah. Right. So it would be very easy for a state or any large organization to produce something like this and get a huge benefit immediately, and then move outwards from there. Okay, let's take care of the most damaged, or what we consider the most damaged, and then start moving down that road. All right. That's, for me, that would be the main focus, right now. That could be something that could really be done. It's not pie in the sky. It's we're discussing doing it in Missouri already. Colorado is looking at a similar program. I mean, DC at Prop 81, which decriminalized psilocybin. So we're not. This isn't like some just out of the universe, no ability to do it. It's like what I could do in a year. That's what I would do, and where I'd start.
And
for sure.
And it seems as if the more evidence that we are able to gather, the more kind of, clinical trials and more research and more applied feedback on this, the better we all are. Right. And even in the last 4 or 5 years, it seems like the sentiment about psychedelics, about psilocybin, has changed a lot.
Yeah. And I do think that, for lack of a better term, the boomer generation has a lot to do with that, because they went through the 60s and in the 70s, that psychedelic movement, the counterculture and stuff, and came out the other side. And some people had some very good experiences, and some people had some very poor experiences, but lots of people in that generation had experiences. Yes. Okay. And that's like the foot in the door. Just because you are a successful lawyer in St. Louis, right, doesn't mean that you're mentally healthy and in a good place. Okay. We, I mean, we've had CEOs come through. I mean, like the gamut is huge, and on the outside, somebody looks very successful, very happy, and then when you sit down and talk with them and watch what they're going through during their session, because when that administration session, we're not just like a trip sitter. It's like I'm there to anchor you to reality. Okay, that's what it comes down to. Like when things get challenging and things get tough. Okay, the best thing that can happen is for that man or that client to look over at me, and I look up from reading my book or taking notes and say, "Hey, how's it going?" Nothing, no anxiety, no nothing. Just because that connection to reality is what somebody needs at that point. They just want to know that everything's okay, and being unworried, nonchalant, like that's the best thing that can happen, And then they drop back into their space, because that's the conscious mind popping up, going, "Oh man, I got to double check. Put the periscope up. Okay, oh, cool. That is still there. Okay, we're good. And we take notes all through it, the things they're saying, the activities they're doing, because so often when we get to that integration phase after, we look back to that or, hey, when you were talking about, this, where does that fit into your life? Oh shit, man, I didn't even know that. That was when I was with my grandma back when I was, 12, and now I wonder why I was thinking about that. What else was I saying? Well, that led to this. And it can open up areas for people that where I think the subconscious is putting those things out there. They're putting them there
to be processed.
So that yeah.
Mike, this has been a beautiful conversation. I hope that for you listeners out there, opens your thinking up about where we are now as a culture, where we could be headed as a culture. I know that this is something that has been important to me and I've been thinking about for a while. Yeah, I want to shout just to Michael Russer. Thank you, Michael Russer, my brother, for giving me this insight. Michael came back. 1 minute story, after Michael's first MDMA experience, he came back. He was so excited to talk to me on the Monday. And he said, "I died this weekend and it was great." And as he was approaching the end of his cancer journey when he passed away, I'm so thankful that he had the opportunity to go through these experiences because, as his own mortality approached, like he was present and open and in love and awake and there for everyone around him. And it was because of these experiences that just like, yeah, I've already died. It's all right. I'm good. I love you. I'm ready. And it was just such a beautiful thing. So thanks, Michael. Thanks, Jacqueline. Yeah. Mike, I'd like to talk to you again and bring you back onto the show. But in the meantime, how should folks learn more about Satya and what you're doing up in Oregon?
Yeah, you're it's always your good friend, the internet, right? It's where we're at in our world now. So I'm sure you do the links, everything, but SatyaTherapeutics.com. We're based in Ashland, Oregon. My own personal website is mushroomhealingtherapy.com. It's searching out the Oregon Psilocybin Services, OPS, which is an actual Oregon government website, and I could give you those things when we
look in the show notes down below.
Yeah, because that's what a lot of people have done. They get tired of the garbage stuff, and because a lot of some weird stuff's kind of going on. When you search psilocybin mushroom in Oregon, the top 20 to 25 actual things that come up, even if they say psilocybin, are actually ketamine therapy, which is a completely different set of things. It definitely has value, but it's not what we're doing. And people get frustrated, actually. And we've had people where they just gave up, and then some family member took over because they couldn't find what they were looking for. So yeah, that's the easiest way to get a hold of us, and then you just call, and then somebody will call you back, and you pick somebody on the bio page that you think might fit, or 2 or 3, and speak to each one of them, and you're not going to hurt any of our feelings. If you have 3 talking to 3 of us and you don't pick me, that is perfectly okay, because I'm going to see you there anyway. So it's, I'm going to see you going in, and I'm going to see what you look like coming out, and I'm going to be smiling both times.
Thank you. And I'm going to be smiling both times. Mike Welch, thank you very much, brother. It was really good to be with you today.
I appreciate the time, and I look forward to talking to you again, Boysen.
This has been the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. And I personally want to thank our guests for joining us today and imparting their wisdom from their experiences in this amazing journey called life. Now, the fee for this episode is simple. If you found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, remember that life doesn't happen to us, it happens for us, so long as we rip the pen out of fate's hand and become the author of our own story. So my friend, pick up the pen, and we'll see you next week. Lots of love.